Right, boys, for 2.4, theories in the field of psychology, how psychologists practically apply psychological theory, you have to make a prediction about the two fields of psychology that you've written about. Okay, so this is excellence criteria. If you're aiming for excellence, this is what you need to do. The comprehensive examination of the theories used in the fields means you evaluate the theories, you consider the implications, and you predict how the fields may evolve over time. So let's first look at educational psychology and how might this change in the future. All right, so first of all, you have to have a firm understanding of what educational psychologists do now. And for your second field of psychology, you have to have a firm grasp. What is their task? What is their job now? All right, so if you think educational psychologists, they help students learn, they help teachers improve learning, they apply psychological theory to improve education, right? That's what they do. And they do that through helping students, teachers, and even governments and policies and practices. So you have to think about, well, what might this look like in the future? Now, this is tricky. There's no one right answer for this. There's not an answer in my mind that I'm expecting to see. There's multiple possible answers. I'm excited to read what you're going to come up with here. And think about, will they have new tools? Will classrooms look different? Will there be different goals of an educational psychologist, or maybe some new challenges posed? Where do you think the world's heading, right? Where do you think schools are going based on your experiences, and how do you think educational psychologists might grapple with that? Let's look at some examples of changes in fields of psychology. If we think clinical psychology, back then the goal was to remove people with disorders, remove people who were mentally unwell, right, and contain them. And we see here someone wearing a straitjacket, right, so they don't hurt themselves and other people. You look at the psychiatric hospitals of the past were run very much like prisons, right? Now the goal is rehabilitation, helping, comforting, supporting. It's coming from a place of empathy and trying to get people back out into society. You can argue whether or not this has been successful or not, because now our prisons are, a lot of people argue, our mental hospitals, because those places that's where they are contained so they don't do any damage. But anyway, that's where we've gone with clinical psychology. Think as well, right? Back then, shell shock, men in war, the horrific arduous, the ordeals that men had to face in trench warfare, in all war, right? Vietnam War, more recently Gulf War, wars in the Middle East. So then it was ignored, not understood, right? Men came home, swept under the rug. Now we can use new technology, virtual reality therapy, to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. And so instead of ignoring it, ironically, we put these men back into the situations that gave them PTSD in the first place. And by exposing them to the things that freak them out, it can actually reduce their symptoms, because their brain will learn, oh, I don't have anything to be afraid of now, I'm safe. Developmental psychology from the 1950s, based on behaviorism. The goal was control, the goal was conditioning, rewards and punishments, right? Influenced by Watson, behaviorism, okay? We need to control the kids. Children should be seen and not heard, was the common saying. Right now, developmental psychology is about bonding and attachment, based out of attachment theory, and giving kids the autonomy and freedom to make their own decisions and make their own choices, which I personally don't really agree with in that Western philosophy of parenting. But anyway, this is, again, things of much more about attachment and bonding. So then it was control, now it's attachment. Clinical psychology again with ADHD. So back then, and even still now, right, it's medication, but medication for ADHD goes back to 1934. And this is a type of, not this one, I'm not sure, but Ritalin, but Benzedrine, back in 1934. That's a type of speed, methamphetamine, used to treat ADHD. Now, well, this is a bit more debatable, but anyway, people use computer game training to treat ADHD. So instead of altering their brains with chemicals, we alter their brains with computer games and try to engage them and reduce their ADHD symptoms this way. Another example of technology being used to reduce and treat a disorder. And so hopefully you might see a trend there, right, with technology. So now that's not saying I'm expecting you to all write about technology, but that's kind of a logical thing to think about. Where might technology go? What problems could technology pose? And then how might that change the field of psychology? So you need to have a prediction of how might educational psychology change in the future, and you do the same for the field that you've done for theory number 2. Are you doing sports psychology, health psychology, industrial, organizational, forensic, etc., etc.? How do you think that field of psychology might change in the future? All right, so for things, just for educational psychology, things to contemplate, again, technology. So what might a future classroom look like? What might, think about are there going to be more problems caused by technology that educational psychologists will have to deal with? Will students change? Will technology solve a lot of problems? How might technology influence what an educational psychologist might have to do? If we look in New Zealand, there's very much we have adopted a bicultural strategy in education, right, and raising the status of Māori in schools, and raising the status of Motoronga Māori, which I believe is the knowledge base of Māori. So, and then the idea of equity, trying to get equal, how you define equal opportunities. Some say equal outcomes for groups of people, so that's a goal. Personally, I'm not a fan of New Zealand's bicultural identity, of course, because I have Japanese children, so I want them to feel included in New Zealand. It's ironic. We have the idea of inclusion. I understand where the biculturalism comes from. I wish we were adopting a multicultural approach. But anyway, I won't go into that. Couldn't help myself. Or are there other? Okay, so that's what you want to look at. All right. So I hope that was helpful. And again, remember, you need to have 2 predictions. One for educational psychology and one for the second field of your choice. If you want to see examples of these written out, then look at my exemplars on How to Dad and the clinical example on phobias, and you'll see some examples there of how it might change in the future. I think my How to Dad exemplar has 3. You only need to write one well-written one. Okay, good luck, boys.